From guns to governance, DDR and RRI in the Oromo struggle and beyond. For generations, the Oromo people have struggled against political exclusion, cultural suppression, and armed domination. Today, the long arc of that struggle brings us to a crucial crossroad: how to transform armed conflict into peaceful political life. At the center of that transformation are two concepts central to peacebuilding: DDR, Disarmament, Demobilization, and Reintegration, and RRI, Restitution, Rehabilitation, and Integration. Over the next few minutes, we will explore what these frameworks mean, why they matter, and how they intersect with the Oromo journey for justice and self-determination. 1. What are DDR and RRI? To build peace, we must understand its building blocks. DDR is a structured, internationally recognized process that takes weapons out of conflict zones, disbands armed groups, and supports former fighters as they transition into civilian or state roles. According to the United Nations, DDR aims to support ex-combatants and those associated with armed groups, so they can become active participants in the peace process, including reintegration, as civilians or in official security forces. At its core, DDR asks three questions. Can we collect weapons? Can we disband organized fighting? Can former fighters build sustainable lives without arms? RI, on the other hand, looks beyond fighters to the societies and victims affected by conflict. Restitution focuses on returning land, housing, and rights taken by force. Rehabilitation addresses physical and psychological healing. Integration rebuilds social trust and economic participation. In essence, while DDR focuses on the security dimension of peace, RRI focuses on human recovery and social justice. 2. Why sequence and politics matter. In peacebuilding, the order of actions is crucial. Disarming fighters without addressing the underlying causes of conflict often leads to a resurgence of violence. The African Union stresses that DDR must be integrated with political negotiation, structural reforms, and justice mechanisms. It is not merely a technical process, it is inherently political, requiring carefully sequenced commitments that foster trust among all parties. Peace initiatives that prioritize disarmament before meaningful power sharing or guarantees of justice often leave combatants disillusioned and likely to return to arms. Conversely, focusing solely on justice without addressing security concerns can make former fighters feel exposed or targeted. In Ethiopia, the federal security structure adds another layer of complexity. Many Oromo perceive police, military, and intelligence forces as aligned with the central government, rather than acting neutrally. This raises a critical question. How can ex-combatants and civilians trust that disarmament or reintegration efforts will not be politically exploited? Peace processes must explicitly address security neutrality. Otherwise, DDR risks consolidating central control, and RRI may fail to restore social trust. 3. DDR and RRI in practice. Global lessons. Around the world, peace processes offer lessons on combining DDR and RRI. In Sierra Leone, the Lome Peace Accord ended a brutal civil war. Other programs collected weapons and helped tens of thousands of fighters reintegrate into civilian life. Communities received support for rebuilding, and ex-combatants were given training, stipends, and land assistance. While challenges remained, Sierra Leone's experience showed how DDR can reduce the immediate capacity for violence and help stabilize post-war societies. In South Africa, the end of apartheid did not follow a conventional DDR program because there was no formal armed insurgency on the scale of a civil war. Instead, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, became a powerful model of RRI, giving voice to victims and perpetrators alike and recommending reparations and social healing measures. The TRC was not without critique, but it shows how social reconciliation can be part of peacebuilding when arms are already silent. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, post-war DDR focused intensely on reducing militia capability, but it struggled because political settlement remained incomplete, and social mistrust persisted. This highlighted how DDR and RRI must reinforce one another, not operate in isolation. 4. The Ethiopian context, DDR aspirations and challenges, DDR and security neutrality in Oromia. Ethiopia has a historical precedent for DDR. Following the fall of the Derg regime in 1991, the transitional government implemented a nationwide DDR program between 1991 and 1997, which is still referenced by peace practitioners for its relative success in reducing militia numbers and facilitating reintegration. This process contributed to stabilizing several regions in the post-war period. More recently, peace negotiations between the federal government and armed groups, including those involved in the Oromo conflict, have created frameworks for disarmament and reintegration into civilian life or security institutions. Analysts, however, caution that DDR cannot succeed in Oromia without addressing long-standing political grievances, structural inequalities, contested governance, and unresolved autonomy issues mean that DDR in isolation may only suppress violence temporarily. Durable peace requires accompanying political settlement and RRI. For Oromo communities, trust in federal security structures remains limited. Without credible guarantees, disarmament can be seen as coercive, and reintegration efforts risk partial or uneven implementation. Neutral, community-trusted security mechanisms are therefore essential prerequisites. Interim power-sharing arrangements between the federal government and Oromo liberation movements could include co-management of security and administration, legal guarantees of political participation, oversight by impartial observers, mechanisms for dispute resolution, and agreed timelines for elections. These measures provide safeguards, enabling DDR and RRI while protecting Oromo rights and autonomy. RRI and the politics of justice. RRI embodies the intersection of justice and peacebuilding. Restitution restores property and rights denied during conflict. Rehabilitation addresses physical and psychological trauma, and integration ensures full participation of historically marginalized communities in political and economic life. International examples illustrate the importance of combining justice with DDR. South Africa's TRC showed how truth-telling and reparations can bridge deep societal divides. In Sierra Leone, truth commissions and reparations programs complemented DDR by recognizing victims' suffering and recommending economic support measures. In Oromia, effective RRI similarly requires security neutrality. Without impartial protection, restitution may be blocked, rehabilitation undermined, and integration incomplete. Experience from post-war DDR programs demonstrates that trust in institutions and political impartiality are as crucial as material resources in rebuilding social cohesion and sustaining peace. 6. What it means for the Oromo struggle. For many Oromo, the conflict with the Ethiopian state has always been about more than guns or territory. It is fundamentally about recognition, justice, dignity, and meaningful political participation. Any effort to transition from violence to peace must engage with this layered reality. DDR can reduce the capacity for armed conflict, but without a political settlement and complementary RRI, it risks merely freezing tensions rather than resolving them. Similarly, RRI can facilitate healing and justice, but cannot succeed in an environment where security concerns remain unresolved. The Oromo struggle for self-determination and equitable governance requires moving beyond binary choices. Lasting peace does not arise solely from disarmament, nor from gestures of justice in isolation. It depends on a negotiated settlement that respects human dignity, shared political space, and pathways for all communities to participate in shaping the future. For Oromo communities, peace is more than the absence of violence. It requires recognition, justice, and political inclusion. DDR and RRI must therefore operate alongside reforms that ensure the security apparatus is neutral, accountable, and trusted. Without such guarantees, disarmament may be perceived as coerced, and restitution may be contested or unsafe. Durable peace depends on political settlement recognizing Oromo rights and autonomy. DDR processes sequenced with political guarantees. RI programs embedded in neutral and credible security frameworks. Inclusive institutions preventing dominance by any single group. When these pillars align, Peace transcends temporary silence. It becomes just, inclusive, and sustainable. In conclusion, the DDR and RRI are not just technical processes. They are political commitments, commitments to end cycles of violence, to acknowledge past harms, and to build governance systems grounded in equality and mutual recognition. As the Oromo journey continues to unfold, through negotiation, civic engagement, and political transformation, the lessons of DDR and RRI remind us that sustainable peace is possible only when justice, security, and human dignity walk together. Before we wrap up, what are the demands of the Oromo or Oromia against the Ethiopian empire massed in federations? Let's have this short but deep dive dialogue.
Okay, so for today's deep dive, we're heading to the Horn of Africa. We're going to unpack something that, usually just gets labeled political unrest.
Right.
But it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Oromo question.
And that's the thing. When you hear about it, it's always framed as some current political spat inside Ethiopia.
Yeah, just another headline.
Exactly. But if you actually dig into the sources, you see this isn't new at all. It's a century-long struggle for the Oromo nation, who are, by the way, the single largest ethno-national group in the whole region.
And the argument we're looking at today is pretty radical. It basically says the current map of the Horn of Africa is fundamentally broken.
It is. The idea isn't just about, correcting a historical wrong.
It's that an independent Oromia might actually be the only path to regional stability.
It's a bold claim, for sure. But the logic behind it is rooted in this concept of internal colonialism. The argument is that the Oromo experience, it wasn't some kind of merger of equals. It was a straight-up conquest, starting back in the late 1800s with Emperor Menelik II.
I was looking at the numbers from that period, and they're terrifying. Historians estimate the Oromo population fell from 10 million to just 5 million.
It's a demographic collapse.
Wait, hold on. They lost half their population in just a couple of decades.
Yes. And it wasn't just from the fighting itself. It was the famine and the disease that always followed the armies.
And for the survivors.
Well, once the dust settled, they were forced into a system that stripped them of pretty much everything. Think of it like a classic settler colonial model.
So the soldiers who did the conquering became the new landlords.
That's it. And the Oromo farmers became serfs, working their own ancestral land for someone else. They called it the Neftenyas system.
And it wasn't just economic, was it?
Not at all. The goal was, and some sources call it this, cultural death. They banned the Oromo language, Afern, Oromo. They dismantled their institutions. It was an attempt to erase an entire identity.
Which, explains why these grievances run so deep today. But this is where I start to wonder. When a region wants to break away, the big question is always governance. Do they just fall into chaos?
That's what makes this so fascinating. The argument is they don't need to import some Western model. They already have a blueprint. It's called the Gada system.
I've heard the name, but I always assumed it was, sort of a vague tradition, like elders sitting under a tree.
Far from it. It's an incredibly sophisticated, indigenous democratic system. And it's ancient. It predates many Western systems we think of as the default.
Okay, so what does it actually look like?
It's got strict 8-year term limits for the leader, the Abagada.
8 years and you're out. No extensions, no exceptions.
Rigidly enforced. Plus, it has legislative assemblies, they're called kafi, and all these checks and balances to prevent anyone from monopolizing power.
But didn't Ethiopia try to address this with the 1995 constitution? It promised ethnic federalism, right?
Right.
It even has Article 39, the right to secede.
In theory, yes. But in practice, Oromo nationalists will tell you it was just a facade. The real breaking point, the moment that proved the system was hollow, was the master plan back in 2014.
That was the plan to expand the capital, Addis Ababa.
Right into Oromia's territory, essentially swallowing up Oromo land.
And that's what triggered the youth protests, the Kwiru.
It did, because for many, it proved the federal system would never protect them. So the only path left was full sovereignty.
Okay, so the political blueprint is there. But let's talk money. Because breakaway states often end up broke. Is an independent Oromia economically viable?
Oh, absolutely. They call it the coffee kingdom for a reason. Oromia produces something like 59% of all of Ethiopia's coffee.
That is a lot of lattes.
It's the whole economic engine. But it's not just coffee. You're talking about the country's largest gold mine, Dembi. They're the sixth largest producer of tantalum in the world.
Kind of the water, right.
That's maybe the biggest piece. They're the water tower of the region. They control the headwaters of the Blue Nile.
So they'd have the water and the energy sources.
Exactly. So the argument isn't that they'd be a fragile, failed state. It's that they would immediately be an economic powerhouse.
It really flips the script, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Instead of independence being this huge destabilizing threat, the argument is that it's a move from a predatory relationship to a functional one.
That's the core of it. Moving toward what they call naga, which means peace. The idea is that a stable, democratic Oromia, anchored in its own Gada system, could actually stabilize the entire Horn of Africa.
It really makes you wonder, if we stopped trying to just copy-paste Western democracy everywhere and actually looked at the indigenous governance structures that are already there,
Sure.
how many other conflicts could find a path to peace? Definitely something to think about.
So, as we have heard from the dialogue and is presented by Oromo nationalists, the question of Oromia is not only about borders or flags. It is about whether the Horn of Africa can move beyond empires disguised as federations and toward a future built on sovereignty, cooperation, and historical truth. Stability does not come from suppressing nations. It comes from finally listening to them. What is your take on this matter? Let's have your thoughts in the comments section. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like